Today we're going to be looking at the basics of spline modeling in 3ds Max, specifically in how to create splines themselves. In a later video we will go over how to model with splines, but today we're just going to be looking at how to create them. To do so, what we're going to do is go to our Create tab, because if we want to create something we go to our Create tab. And then here, normally what we've been looking at is geometry, but we're going to go one to the right under Shapes. And these shapes are basically our splines. So I have a lot of basics here, so let's first just take a look at a line. And a line is created by clicking somewhere in our scene, and I can either hold my mouse or just drag it. And all I'm doing is I just clicked once and let go, and I'm just using my mouse to drag a line. If I click another spot, then it will place a vertex there or a point. And I can continue to do this until I get the shape I want, or if I go to with the last point back to the first point, it will ask me if I want to close the spline, and from there I can say yes. So that's the basics of creating an object or a basic line, but there's other things that we can do. If I click and hold my mouse and I go to another spot, now I've got kind of, so what I did is I clicked and I held and went to another spot and let go, and now I've got a curve. If I click another spot, then it will be straight, but if I click where I want that point to be and hold, then I can do, again, a curve. We can get all kinds of neat little shapes. And then if I go back to the beginning, I'll be able to close my spline. Now from here, I can't, once I've created it, I can't really do too much with it. If I decided that that wasn't the shape that I wanted, or I'm on the wrong axis, I can't really do too much until I right click and convert to an editable spline. I can come in and choose vertex, segment, or spline. Vertex is the little points that we made. Segment is the lines in between the vertex. And spline is the entire thing. So if I come into vertex and choose one of my vertices, I can modify it, move it, change it, and change that shape however I want. If I want to change this from being a corner or very sharp, what I can do is choose one of those vertices or any number of vertices and right click on it. And here I have Bezier, corner, and smooth. These give me different types of curves. So corner, which I have now, works just as it says, it's a corner, two very sharp angles. If I change one to maybe Bezier, then I can see that I have that curve that I was messing with before. What if I choose to and go to smooth? Okay, now we have a rounded line. That's the average of both vertices that we've selected. And from there, I can still continue to move them, manipulate them how I want. Now, if I like this shape and I wanted to use this shape, and maybe I have this shape right here and I want it to be renderable, I want it to be a mesh. Right now it's a spline, but I can change that by going to rendering. And there are two options that I can choose. I can choose Enable in Renderer and Enable in Viewport. If I click on Enable in Viewport, and what it does is it takes on the properties that I have here, so either radial or circular, and then rectangular, so I can change my thickness so we can see it a little bit better, how many sides I want it to be, the angle of those sides. So I can change these things, and I can see that in my viewport. However, if I render, I don't see anything because I don't have my rendering enabled in the renderer. So if I click to enable there, what I should see is this shape now. And I do. Now if I like this shape and I want to use it beyond just what a spline would let me do, I can right click on it and convert to an editable mesh or an editable poly. And then from there, I took that spline and I made a mesh out of it. So now I can manipulate these vertices. I can manipulate the edges, the lines, the polygons, whatever I want to do. So let's talk about something else that we can do in Editable Spline. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and delete these two objects. And what I have over here is an object that I created earlier. And it's basically a circle on the bottom, a circle on the top, and I have lines that are connecting it. So if I go here to Editable Spline, you can see that I have 4 vertices on the top and the bottom, and then lines that are connecting them. And what I can do with this is I basically created a 3D shape using 2D splines. And I can come to my modifier and go to cap holes, and this will kind of fill in the 2D shapes that I made to be that 3D shape that I had represented. Okay, another one we can do, and we're getting into some modifiers, and that's okay, is I'm going to go to line and go to my front view, and I'm just going to create a quick shape. Maybe have some curves in there. Okay, close that spline, yes. If I want to manipulate some of those curves that I don't like, then I can again turn that into an editable spline, convert it to an editable spline, where I can come in and change all of these lines however I want. I can change the curves if I want. I can manipulate these how I want to. So maybe I want this to be smooth. Okay. Maybe I want this to be a corner. So I'm going to right click and change that to a corner, which it is. I'll change both those to a corner. Okay. Change this back to smooth. Okay, so I like this shape. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come to my modifier tab, come down to my modifier list, and I'm going to choose lathe. And what this does is also allows me to create a 3D object from my 2D shapes, and I could make all kinds of things. It used the shape that we made to create this, but it doesn't look exactly like we had it. So what I'm going to do is delete this lathe, and instead I want it to do my shape from this edge here. The reason why it didn't work before is if we see this right here, this is our transform, and right now it's in the middle of our shape. We can change that. I'm going to go to my hierarchy tab, and I'm going to be adjusting the pivot. But all I want to do is just adjust the pivot, so I'm going to say affect pivot only. And then from here we have like a second transform that comes up. I can move, rotate this transform, but I'm just going to move it, and I'm going to move it to the edge that I want my lathe to work from. So this is now going to be the center of my shape that I created with the 3D shape that was created with the lathe. So from here, I'm going to click this off so it's no longer being affected. Come back to my modifier tab, come to my modifier list, again choose lathe, and now we can see that shape looks different than it did before because I changed the pivot. If I wanted it to be on a different axis, I can choose that. But what we wanted to do was on the y-axis. Okay, so what we've done is we've gone over creating basic shapes, how we can take those shapes to create a 3D object. We can use a modifier like lathe to create an object. So what I would recommend is to go through these options, create any kind of shape that you want, any kind of spline, play around with them, try creating different shapes and then combining them together. So maybe I have these two shapes here and I want to combine them. So I click on one, right click and convert to editable spline. And then from there I can attach other shapes. So I'm going to click on attach and attach that shape. Okay, so I've got multiple shapes attached to each other, and if I want to continue to modify them, maybe I want to add lines and kind of do like I did here. From there we can create a line, and I'm going to select one where I want to start, let go. And here, now what we're going to see is that it's not exactly there. It looks like they're attached here, but if we rotate around, it's not. So there are ways to attach that. All I'm going to do is just come up and move this so it's kind of in line with what I was trying to attach it to. Real easy, real quick. Create a line. And I'll just do all of these real quick, and then we'll adjust them. Okay, so from there again we'll move that up to the spline, the second part of the spline, the upper circle. Just moving those really quick. You're under here. Let's move you where you belong. And then from there we can do that cap holes like we did before. And we can see our shape. We'll get more into this where we're creating a 3D object from 2D shapes when we have a video about modeling with splines. But until then, again, I would advise you to play around with shapes, create different shapes, connect them together, try to do different modifiers if you want to. Here we have cap holes, here we have lathe, and just have fun with it. Until then.